Hello and welcome everybody. I am Liz and this is Korean Crime Time, where I'm your host, and I will be sitting down and talking about a true crime case. Most of the time I create art at the same time. I may or may not have something just added to this video. But today's case we're going to be talking about the 1991 case of the Austin yogurt shop murders. So this case is an unsolved quadruple homicide. Now, this took place at the shop of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt in Austin, Texas. And this happened on a Friday, December 6th of 1991. I was just a baby when this happened. It's so sad. So, just a warning before we go into these cases. Now, I don't mean any disrespect when it comes to the victims' families. This is merely educational and to help get more, like, the word across about these cases. That's really what I want. I want these cases to be solved just as much as everybody else does. So, yeah. So, with that being said, oh, and also this is the 25 Days of True Crime. I forgot to say that. I wanted to add this in as another unsolved case. I do have a few others that I'm going to be adding in here. So, I feel that my viewers in particular enjoy the unsolved cases more than the solved cases, because there's more, like, you wonder more about an unsolved case. I mean, you're going to wonder about a solved case, but yeah, so anywho, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, turn your bell notification on to all, and thank you for any returning subscribers. So, sorry about my long ramble. Let's get into this case, okay? Let's get into this. So, around midnight, a policeman reported fire in a shop, and first responders were the ones that discovered the bodies of girls inside of the building. The victims had been shot in the head. Some had been raped. A .22 and a .38 caliber pistol is what was used to commit the murders. It was also found that the perpetrator perpetrators possibly exited through a back door that was found unlocked. And it was a very organized method of operation. The ability to control these girls, the destruction of evidence, and the arson, it all really pointed to an adult experience in crime rather than teenagers, because there was a very, like, clear, concise way of the way that they did this. And this is according to the original detectives on the case. So the Austin Police Department, or the APD, they have DNA from the crime scene, from one of the rapes, but it's still unknown at this time. There is a Y chromosome match for the perpetrator's DNA in. It's been found in the research database for the FBI, but they've declined revealing the identity of the man because of there's a law about letting anonymous donors be anonymous, and also because it's more than likely that thousands of men could bear the same fragment of DNA, which thus it's unable to use to identify individuals. So the actual murders, shortly before midnight on December 6th of 1991, this is when a patrolman noticed that the fire was coming out of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop, and then he reported to his dispatcher. After the fire was extinguished, that's when they found the 4 nude bodies. Each girl had been shot in the head execution style with a .22 caliber lead bullet. One of the victims, her name is Sarah. Sarah's hands were bound behind her with a pair of underwear. She had also been gagged and raped. Another girl, Jennifer, she was not bound, but her hands were behind her back. Eliza had been gagged and her hands were tied behind her back. And all three were severely charred and shot in the back of the head. So unlike the others, the girl Amy, she was found in a separate part of the shop and she was not charred, but she did receive second and very early stages of third-degree burns on about 25 to 30% of her body. She was found with a sock-like cloth around her neck. She had been shot the same way as the others. However, the bullet had missed her brain. She also had a second bullet, which caused severe damage to her brain, exiting through the lateral cheek of the jawline. So the way that they shot, it just basically, the trajectory didn't go straight through and through. It was cocked off to the side. It is thought that the killers had stacked all four bodies on top of another, but that Amy had pulled herself off and managed to crawl to a different part of the store. Sarah and Eliza's bodies were found, they were found stacked on top of each other with Jennifer's body. So that's where that thought behind Amy was the one that was able to get away, is because of the way that they were. So autopsy results show that there was a high BTU output, which basically means that there was an accelerant that was used. Initially, they thought that there was a large number of persons of interest, and among them was a 15-year-old who was caught with a .22 caliber in a nearby mall literally days after the murders. Although he initially gave good intel about the case, and after tough questioning, the detectives decided that he was just trying to get himself out of the gun charges and eliminated him and 3 petty criminals of his friends who he also had implicated. And none of them were older than 17 at the time. So, several years later, a new detective theorized that the 4 teens from the 1991 case were credible suspects, but by this time they were in their 20s and different countless amounts of questioning sessions from different detectives and confessions were obtained from other suspects. They said all 4 had participated in the murder, but there was no record. No record was kept of what was said to these men in the 1991 investigation and interrogations, making it clearly impossible to know whether the detectives had supplied information to the suspects in regards to the initial investigation. So literally this case was all over the place. It was super sloppy. Nobody really kept notes about anything. It was bad. It was truly bad. Not even gonna say the comment that I was thinking of. No. So 2 of the 4 were sent to trial, entirely due to their self-incriminating statements. The prosecution went into great detail about the horrific nature of the crimes and the crimes themselves against the young victims, but they didn't present any hard evidence other than confessions. There was nothing. Nothing. So 2 were convicted, 1 being sentenced to death and the other being sentenced to life in prison because he was 15 at the time. However, prosecution's tactic of using excerpts of one another's alleged confessions at the other's trial was ruled to having violated the confrontation clause because the co-defendant was not testifying. Both convictions were overturned based on that clause alone, and the men were freed in 2009. So bad. So prosecution insisted that they would have to be retried. However, forensic investigation showed that the DNA found on the victim was not theirs, nor was it that of the other two that was implicated in their confessions. Prosecution would abandon plans for a retrial. So they were just like, oh, well, we were in the wrong. Nope. So, you think after realizing that they got it wrong the first time, they wouldn't try anything else. But, I mean, so Texas courts later decided that those released were not entitled to compensation because they had not proven that they did not commit the crime. I think that's horseshit. I think they should have compensated these guys because they wrongfully convicted 2 of them. They're not attached to the crime because their DNA is not found there. That's not their DNA, that Y chromosome. And you don't know if they were coerced or not with their confession. I don't like cases like this at all. So one of the detectives in the investigation, Hector Polanco, he was accused of coercing false confessions. And especially in the case of Christopher Ochoa and Richard Danziger. So both of them were released from prison after spending 13 years in prison. And Danziger was assaulted in prison, which resulted in permanent brain damage. So, man. They would go on to ask jurors about these cases, especially when when they were released, whether or not they would have convicted them based on what they had at the time. And they said they wouldn't convict these guys based on the evidence that was presented because they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything at all. So at the time of the murders, there was a serial killer that was at large at the time, and his name is Kenneth Mcduff, and he was in the area. He had a history of multiple murders involving teenagers, but he was ruled out. And he was also executed on November 17th of 1998. So, I mean, that was just a dead end. I have another serial killer to add to my collection. Alright, so there was a lot of false confessions that happened with this case, obviously. So, the APD admit that over 50 people, including Mcduff, so Kenneth Mcduff, the other serial killer that I just said, on the day of his execution, he said he confessed to the yogurt shop murders. A confession in 1992 by 2 Mexican nationals. While they were being held by Mexican authorities, also confessed. This was soon disputed and ruled false. So in 2006, man, this is so bad. Like, I don't... Why do they... I don't know. It's just so bad. So bad. I just don't get it. I don't get why they try to... Why try and blame a crime on somebody when clearly they didn't commit it? Like, I just don't understand it. Don't screw people out of things when clearly they didn't do anything wrong. Like, and you're keeping them in jail on false accusations and false thoughts. In 1999, that's when they arrest the group of those teenagers, and they're Robert Burns Springsteen, Michael James Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. Well, so in 2006, this is when Robert Springsteen's conviction was overturned. And in 2007 is when the Supreme Court refused to reinstate his conviction. So they the reason why they overturned it is because they believed it was an unfair trial. Like, he didn't deserve what they said that he did. None of that. So 2008 rolls around, August 20th, 2008. Defense lawyers for Scott and Springsteen request DNA tests. So, and they request DNA testing of alternate suspects. No matches against evidence was discovered, and this is when the jurors said that they wouldn't convict these men because there's nothing to tie them to it. I swear this case is just built on that will of a cop being like, "Oh, you guys look guilty. You can take the fall for this." It's the same thing as, like, if you've ever read or watched To Kill a Mockingbird, how it's falsely accusing a man of a crime that he didn't commit and putting him on trial for that. It's literally, I mean, same basis, not same, like, underlying theme of, like, a racial trial, like, but still, it's falsely accusing a man of doing something he didn't commit. Yowza. So 2009 is when Scott and Peterson would be released, and they were able to walk out of jail accompanied by their attorneys. Later that day, the county district attorney, Rosemary Limburg, she responded to a decision that was ruled by the judge, Judge Mike Lynch. And I have the statement right in front of me. I'll read it. It's pretty long, but I'll read it literally word for word. So, today I requested a continuance in the case against Michael Scott, a defendant in the yogurt shop murders, whose trial is scheduled to begin on July 6th. Judge Mike Lynch granted the motion, but also released both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen on personal bond, as he indicated he would do in his previous scheduled order. Requesting a delay in the case was a difficult decision, but one that I believe is the best course toward an ultimate successful prosecution of this important matter. Knowing that Judge Lynch would release both defendants, we requested certain conditions on their bonds, requiring them to remain in Travis County and report to the court any change of residence, to have no contact with the victims' families or witnesses, and that they do not carry weapons or consume alcohol or illegal drugs. They also have to report to the court on a routine basis and attend all court appearances. As you know, both Springsteen and Scott were convicted by juries in June 2001 and September 2002. Their convictions were overturned by the appellate court, but their statements to law enforcement were found to be voluntarily given. Since the original trial of these two men, new developments in DNA technology have become available. As we prepare for retrial in March 2008, we submitted various evidentiary items for what is called YSTR testing. And this test looks for male DNA only and is deemed to be the most accurate test for samples that are mixtures of female and male. We sought this testing because we have an ongoing duty and responsibility to use the most up-to-date science available. To seek the truth is this in all the cases we prosecute. Currently, it is clear to me that the evidence in the death of these 4 young women includes DNA from one male whose identity is not yet known to us. The defense asserts that the testing reveals more than one unknown male, but the evidence presented at the hearing on Thursday, June 18th, contradicts this notion. The reliable scientific evidence in the case presents one and one only unknown male donor. Given that, I could not, in good conscience, allow this case to go to trial before the identity of this male donor is determined and the full truth is known. I remain confident that both Springsteen and Scott are responsible for the deaths of the yogurt shop, but it would not be prudent to risk a trial until we also know the nature of the involvement of this unknown male. My office and the Austin Police Department remain committed to these cases. Their further investigation will continue to be a priority. My commitment to the victims, their families in this community, is that we will not give up until all the people responsible for this terrible and tragic murders are brought to justice. Well, I like how there's such an underlying notion of, I still believe these guys are guilty. I don't care what DNA says, I still think they're guilty. And I really like how she thinks that there's multiple unknown males for DNA, but yet they even said in the initial investigation that there was only one DNA. What's the word I'm looking here? They only found a trace amount of one male DNA. Yeah, so that statement was released on June 24th of 2009. Fast forward to October 28th, 2009, all charges were dismissed against Scott and Springsteen. They had nothing to keep them there. Nothing. So fast forward to the following year on the 23rd of December of 2010, and this is when the APD, like an Austin police officer, his name is Frank Wilson, and his rookie partner, Bradley Smith, they conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle that was driven by Maurice Pierce. He was a suspect in this case, in the original case, and he was stopped in the northern part of the city. So after a brief foot pursuit, Pierce struggled with Wilson before removing a knife from his belt, and he stabbed Officer Wilson in the neck. So Wilson did survive his injuries. He then pulled out his gun and he shot Maurice. So fast forward to this year, 2021. Now this has been 30 years. We literally just passed the 30-year mark on the 6th of this month. So a Texas congressman, he passed legislation for cold cases. So on the 8th, so 2 days after the 30th anniversary of this case, the House Judiciary Committee passed legislation from a representative named Michael McCall, and this gives families of cold case victims the opportunity to petition the federal government to re-examine cases older than 3 years. So that's a step in the right direction when it comes to cold cases, and I really hope that these families really do look into this, because that's something that they really need to do. They need to get people going when it comes to working on these cold cases, because if not, they're going to remain unsolved and you're never going to get closure for these crimes. So the murders of these 4 girls, they were the subject of a book by Beverly Lowry that was released in 2016. Now, the name of it is Who Killed These Girls? Cold Case, The Yogurt Shop Murders. There was also another book that came out in 2016 called Murdered Innocents, as well as a novel called See How Small by Scott Blackwood. Man. I will say too that this case was I noticed this in a CSI New York episode, and I did respond to a comment on Facebook when I found this case. I find a lot of cases on social media, which I'm really happy about, because a lot of these cases I've never heard of. This in particular was one of them I had no idea about, so I'm really happy I found out about this one. This case was the example for one of the episodes of CSI New York, and one of the main characters, well, she becomes a main character later on in the season, but she was involved in a case similar to this. So if you don't like CSI New York, I highly recommend you find this episode if you need a visual guide when it comes to this case to understand really what these girls went through. Now, I didn't go deeply into the actual murders themselves, because the families of these girls are still alive. I mean, by talking about this case, I have the utmost respect for these families, and I really hope that they get the closure that they need when it comes to the death of these young girls, because I'm sorry, nobody deserves to have somebody this young taken away from them, especially in a brutal way that happened. So, anywho, I hope you guys have not to sound like morbid, but I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this or got some insight when it comes to this case. And hopefully there's more things or more updates when it comes to this case, and I will upload in reference to any of those updates. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day wherever you are, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another true crime case. Bye, you guys.